Every man believes his grip is strong enough. Until he grabs the wrong person. The Olympic gold medalist grabbed Bruce Lee by the collar with both hands. The grip that had destroyed champions from Moscow to Munich. The grip his own training lab had measured at the level of industrial machinery. The grip that in 6 years of international competition had never once been broken. 10 seconds later, he was flat on his back. Both hands empty. He sat up slowly, looked at his own fingers, opened and closed them like a man checking if they still worked. Then he stood up and bowed so deep his forehead nearly touched the mat. But here's what nobody tells you about that day. That wasn't the hardest part. After the champion went down, an older man stood up from the edge of the mat. The room went completely still when he rose, the kind of still where even men who've been training for 40 years straighten their posture without being told. He was the senior Kodakan master, and he pointed at Bruce Lee and said 7 words that changed everything about what was happening in that building. One man does not represent this house. 3 specialists stepped onto the mat. Back to back. No rest between them. A throws expert who could send men twice his size through the air. A ground specialist who had never let anyone up once he had them down. And last, the most dangerous of all, a joint lock master who had dislocated shoulders in competition and had studied what happened to the Olympic champion and had already adapted his strategy before he set foot on the mat. Bruce Lee was tired by the 3rd opponent. His collar was torn. His breathing was audible. He had 3 seconds to invent something new. Stay with this story. Because what happened after all 4 opponents were done, what the senior Kodakan master did, what the Olympic champion said quietly just to Bruce on the way out, and what Bruce wrote in his notebook that night alone in his hotel room, is the thing that will change how you think about what it actually means to walk into a room where everyone already knows you're going to lose. Now I want to say something directly to those of you who have been in professional life long enough to have walked into rooms where the institution was the opponent. Where the credentials on the walls and the decades of accumulated authority and the specific silence that falls when you enter were all designed to communicate the same message: you do not belong here. You have not earned the right to be in this room. The people in this room have been doing this longer than you've been alive. You know that room. Some of you have been in it once. Some of you have been in it your entire career. What Bruce Lee did inside the most traditional martial arts institution in the world in Tokyo in 1970 is not a martial arts story. It is a precise demonstration of what happens when someone who has been told they don't belong refuses to defend themselves against that message, and instead, absorbs everything the room has to offer and gives back more than it expected. He walked out with an invitation to tea. In the entire history of the Kodakan, the number of non-judoka who had received that invitation could be counted on one hand. Stay until the end. Because the photograph taken that afternoon, never published, never shown to the press, passed quietly between Kodakan masters and students for years afterward, contains something that no amount of technique can fully explain. Tokyo, 1970. The Kodakan Judo Institute. The martial arts world in Japan was old and structured in a way that Western observers often underestimated. It was not simply a collection of schools and styles. It was a hierarchy built across generations, with the Kodakan at its apex, the institution founded by Jigoro Kano, the man who had systematized judo from traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu and turned it into both an Olympic sport and a global practice. To receive an invitation from the Kodakan was to receive recognition from the institution that, in the minds of its practitioners, represented the pinnacle of what martial arts training could produce. Bruce Lee was in Tokyo for business. Meetings with producers who wanted him for martial arts films. Hong Kong knew his name. Hollywood was beginning to learn it. But in Japan, the reaction to Bruce Lee was different. A man who kicked and punched for the camera was not taken seriously in the world of the Kodakan. Especially not a man who was 5'7" and weighed 140 pounds. Lee knew exactly how they saw him. He had heard it from every grappler he had ever met: striking is useful until someone grabs you. Then it is over. And Lee never argued with this through words. He had learned long ago that debate accomplished nothing that a mat couldn't accomplish better. The letter arrived at his hotel on a Tuesday evening. Formal Kodakan stationery, thick paper, black ink. The senior masters of the Kodakan Judo Institute were inviting Bruce Lee to attend a private demonstration exchange. They wanted to see his methods. They wanted to understand Jeet Kune. The language was polite, almost academic. But Lee was not naive. He had been in rooms like this before. A formal invitation from the most powerful judo institution in the world was not a gesture of curiosity. It was a test. They wanted to see if the man matched the reputation, and if he did not, they wanted 50 witnesses present to confirm it. Lee accepted the same night. One line. "I will be honored to attend." His training partner Taiki Kimura told him it was a bad idea. "You are walking into their house," Taiki said. "Their mat. Their rules. Their people. If anything goes wrong, no one in that room is on your side. Lee smiled. And that smile, according to everyone who knew him, contained more information than any speech. It meant he had already played the whole situation through in his head. Every angle, every possible outcome. He had not accepted the invitation without understanding what the invitation was. He had been studying judo seriously for years. Jigoro Kano's writings, training sessions with judo practitioners in California, analysis of hip throws and foot sweeps and collar grips that went far deeper than most strikers bothered to go. He understood the system, not as a practitioner with years of mat time, but as a student of mechanics who had identified what the system did, why it worked, and where its assumptions about opponent behavior created specific vulnerabilities. Understanding judo on paper and surviving it on the mat against an Olympic champion are two entirely different things. The man waiting for him at the Kodakan was not a textbook. 6 years undefeated in international competition. Olympic gold. Grip strength measured in a Tokyo sports lab at a level the researchers compared to industrial machinery. He had thrown men who outweighed him by 50 pounds. When he grabbed your collar, your body stopped belonging to you. He had seen Bruce Lee's demonstration clips. The 1-inch punch, the speed drills. His reaction was the reaction of every serious grappler who watched a striker perform, unimpressed. Speed means nothing when 220 pounds of trained muscle locks onto your neck and drives you into the ground. He told his training partners the night before, "If this man steps on our mat, I will show everyone what happens when a striker meets a real fighter." Both men walked into the Kodakan that morning believing the same thing, that they were right, that their approach to fighting was the truth. One believed the fist was the ultimate weapon. The other believed the grip was. One of them was about to find out he was wrong. The training hall was full when Lee arrived. 50 men sat along the edges of the mat. All of them wore black belts. Some had been training judo since before Lee was born. They did not stand when he entered. They did not greet him. They simply watched with the specific quality of attention that serious practitioners bring to something they have already assessed and found wanting. Lee walked to the center of the mat alone. Plain black shirt, dark trousers. No GI, no belt, no rank displayed in a room full of men who had earned their positions through decades of discipline. He looked like an outsider. Every person in that room intended for it to remain that way. He began his demonstration without introduction. No speech, no greeting. Footwork patterns, then striking combinations, then the 1-inch punch on a padded target held by a junior student. The room stayed quiet, polite, skeptical, observant. From the far corner, the Olympic champion watched with his arms crossed and an expression that required no translation. Then he stood up. He did not ask permission. He walked to center mat, stopped 3 feet from Bruce Lee, and looked down the 7 inches of height advantage between them. He spoke in Japanese first, then in English so Lee would understand every word. "Your strikes are fast. I give you that. But speed does not matter when a man has you by the throat. One grip. That is all it takes. One grip and your fight is over." Lee did not respond. Did not step back. Did not change his expression. He stood there, loose, balanced, weight-centered, arms at his sides. To everyone watching, it looked like he was doing nothing. He was doing everything. He was reading the champion's posture, weight distribution, the angle of his shoulders, the way his right hand opened and closed. He already knew which hand would reach first. He already knew the grip pattern. He had studied it. The champion reached forward with both hands. Fast, direct. Left hand high, right hand low, the classic judo collar hold. His knuckles turned white. His forearms flexed. He had Lee exactly where he had ended 200 matches. What happened in the next 10 seconds changed every man in that room. The champion pulled. That is what judoka do: grip, pull, break balance, throw. It is a system refined over 100 years. And this pull was violent, 220 pounds of trained force yanking Lee forward and off his center. Lee did not resist. This is where everything turns. Every instinct in a fight tells you to pull back when someone pulls you forward. Every natural reflex demands that you anchor and resist. Lee did the opposite. He moved with the pull. He stepped into it. Let the champion's own force carry him forward. And in that fraction of a second, the champion's balance shifted, because when you pull something and it does not resist, all that force comes back to you. Lee slipped underneath the champion's center of gravity. Not around it. Through it. His body dropped low. His left hand found a pressure point on the inside of the champion's right elbow. His right hand struck a second point just below the collarbone. Then a third, a short palm strike to the sternum. 3 hits in under 2 seconds. Each one precise, each one targeted at a nerve cluster that disrupts the body's ability to grip and hold weight. The champion's hands opened. Not because he chose to release. Because his nervous system misfired. His fingers went slack. His knees buckled. And Bruce Lee, the man who was supposed to be trapped, stepped to the side and let gravity complete what the technique had begun. The Olympic champion hit the mat flat on his back. The sound echoed through the training hall, clean, heavy, the specific thud of a large body landing on a hard surface without any controlled descent. He stared at the ceiling. His palms faced up. Empty. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The champion sat up slowly. He looked at his own hands. Opened and closed his fingers. Then he rose to his feet, straightened his GI, and bowed. Not the quick bow exchanged before a match. A full bow, deep, his back bent until his forehead nearly touched the mat. The bow that a student gives a master. He spoke quietly. It spread through the room within seconds and through the Japanese martial arts world within days. I have grabbed 10,000 men. He is the first one my hands could not hold. The room began to breathe again. Some of the black belts exchanged glances. The worst seemed over. Lee had made his point. The demonstration could end. Then a voice cut through the room like a blade. One man does not represent this house. Lee stopped. His shoe was half on. He looked up. An older man had risen from the far side of the mat. Not physically imposing. Not tall. But the moment he stood, every person in the room straightened their posture without being told. This was the senior Kodakan master, 40 years of teaching judo, a rank so elevated that even the Olympic champion deferred to him without question. He walked slowly to the center of the mat. You have defeated a student. Now face the teachers. The entire nature of what was happening changed in that sentence. This was no longer about one man's pride. This was the Kodakan defending its history, its century of accumulated authority. And they were not going to allow one 10-second exchange to define them. Lee looked at the old master. Then he pulled his shoe back off. Placed it neatly beside the other one at the edge of the mat. Stepped back onto the mat in bare feet. Agreed. 3 names were called. 3 senior judoka stepped to the edge of the mat. The throws expert, tall, long arms, known for hip throws that generated force most people had never experienced in person. The kind of technique that could put a man on the ground hard enough to crack ribs. The ground specialist, shorter, thicker, built like a construction element. Once he had you on the mat, you did not get back up. He had won national championships by pinning opponents so completely that referees stopped matches early to prevent injury. The joint lock master, quiet, patient, his specialty the capture and manipulation of limbs past the point of function. He had dislocated shoulders in competition deliberately, legally, within the rules, and had never once appeared troubled by this. He had also watched what happened to the Olympic champion and had already adapted. 3 opponents, back-to-back, no rest between rounds. This was a gauntlet. Against the throw specialist, Lee changed everything about how he had moved against the champion. He used angles, short lateral steps that kept him off the center line, never giving the tall man the bilateral grip he needed to load his hip throw. Every lunge found Lee already repositioned. 3 consecutive misses. Each one made the specialist more aggressive, and more aggressive meant more committed, and more committed meant more vulnerable. On the 4th lunge, Lee stepped in close. Too close for a throw, inside the geometric requirement that made the technique possible. He drove a short elbow into the floating rib. Not full power, but precise. The specialist folded sideways. Lee swept his front foot with a low kick. Clean, fast, done. The ground specialist shot indifferently. Low, fast, a double-leg takedown that hit Lee at the waist and drove him backward. Lee's feet left the mat. For the first time that day, Bruce Lee was on his back. The specialist moved immediately into a pin, heavy hips, chest pressure, Lee's right arm trapped against the mat, working toward a scarf hold. This was his world. With superior weight and position he had never lost. 5 long seconds. Lee did not move. The room leaned forward. The black belts along the wall exchanged glances. Had they finally found the answer? Then Lee drove his left elbow into the ground specialist's neck. Below the jaw, soft tissue. Not a clean technique. Not a pretty move. A survival move, ugly, necessary, exactly sufficient. The specialist flinched. His weight shifted for half a second. Half a second was enough. Lee bridged his hips, rolled to his side, scrambled free. Got to his feet. His shirt was pulled off his shoulder. His hair was out of place. He was breathing hard. For the first time all day, he did not look calm. He looked like a man who had barely escaped. And the 3rd opponent was already standing at the edge of the mat. The joint lock master stepped onto the mat the way a man enters his own living room. No hurry. No tension. Complete ownership. He bowed slowly. Deliberately. Then he began to circle. Nothing like the previous 2. The throw specialist had been aggressive. The ground specialist had been explosive. This man was patient. He moved as if he had unlimited time. His eyes never left Lee's hands. Every step was balanced, measured. He was not looking for an opening. He was waiting for Lee to create one. Lee recognized it immediately. The most dangerous thing a tired fighter can face. Discipline. This man would not overcommit. He would not lunge. He would not provide the kind of forward energy that could be redirected. He would wait. And the longer he waited, the more Lee's fatigue worked for him. They circled. 15 seconds that felt like a long time in a room that silent. Then the master made his move. A feint toward Lee's left wrist. Lee pulled back, and the feint was the setup. The master transitioned instantly, not to the wrist but to the collar. High left hand, low right hand, locked in. The same grip that had failed against Lee an hour earlier. But this man was not the champion. He did not pull. He did not attempt to throw. He simply held. His arms locked. His grip was iron. And he waited. He had studied what happened to the champion and had removed the one variable Lee had exploited. No pulling force to redirect, no committed momentum to use against its owner. Just a static crushing grip that pinned Lee in place. Lee's eyes changed. Not panic. Calculation. Pure rapid calculation. He had approximately 3 seconds before the master began working toward an arm lock. 3 seconds to invent something that had not existed before this moment. Lee dropped his weight fast. Knees bent, center of gravity falling like a stone dropped straight down. The master's grip held, but his structure could not hold. When Lee dropped, the master's arms were pulled downward. His elbows bent. His posture broke forward by the smallest measurable amount. Just enough. Lee stepped through, not backward, not sideways, through the master's base. Right foot planted between the master's feet. Hip turned. Single palm strike to the center of the sternum. Open palm, short, sharp, every ounce of force compressed through a contact point the size of a fist. The master's grip broke. His hands flew open. His body folded forward. Lee, already moving past him, caught the master's right wrist as it released, twisted underneath it, and locked a wrist control from Wing Chun. Elbow up, wrist bent, the arm extended and completely immobilized. The joint lock master tried to turn. He could not. Tried to pull free. He could not. The man who had spent his career trapping other men's limbs tapped the mat twice with his free hand. It was over. The room did not erupt. It did not cheer. It did something more powerful. 50 black belts. Men who had given their lives to this tradition. They bowed from their seated positions, one by one, without being instructed, without looking at each other. Simply bowing. The senior master who had issued the challenge walked onto the mat. He had watched everything without visible expression from beginning to end. He stopped in front of Lee and bowed. Deep, unhurried. The kind of bow that is not technique, the kind that comes only when a man has witnessed something he did not believe was possible. Lee stood in the center of the mat. His collar was torn. His breathing was audible. Sweat ran down his temples. He did not raise his fists, did not look around for acknowledgement. He simply stood there and let the moment be what it was. The Olympic champion approached him then. Not from the edge. Up close. He had been sitting in the front row watching every exchange, watching the throw specialist fail, watching the ground specialist get escaped, watching the joint lock master tap. And now he stood in front of Lee with a different face than the one he had worn when he walked onto the mat that morning. He spoke quietly. I have trained my grip for 20 years. I could hold a bull by the horns and it would not break free. But you moved through my fingers like water. I did not let go. My hand simply could not hold you. Lee looked at him. I did not defeat your grip. I made your grip defeat you. The force was always yours. I just gave it back. The champion stared at him for a long moment. Then nodded, not a bow this time. The nod that a man gives when he has understood something new. Something he will carry for the rest of his life. The senior master stepped forward again. A younger black belt translated. The masters of the Kodakan invite you to stay for tea. At the Kodakan, tea with the senior masters is not offered to visitors. It is not offered to guests. It is offered only to men recognized as equals in the martial arts, men who have earned the right to sit among the teachers. In the institution's entire history, the number of non-judoka who had received that invitation could be counted on one hand. Bruce Lee had just become one of them. They sat on the floor around a low table in a small room at the back of the training hall. Tea was poured. And for the next hour, something remarkable happened. The men who had challenged Lee, who had wanted to see him fail, who had organized a gauntlet specifically designed to exhaust and defeat him, talked with him as equals. They asked about his footwork, his pressure point strikes, how he had escaped from the ground. Lee answered every question openly. He held nothing back. He drew diagrams on a napkin. He demonstrated hand positions. He explained the mechanics of redirection in terms that related directly to their own judo training. He was not guarding secrets. He was sharing knowledge. And then he did something that nobody in that room expected. He pulled out a small worn leather notebook from his back pocket. Pages filled with hand-drawn diagrams, Wing Chun, boxing, fencing, wrestling, and yes, Judo. He had been studying their art for years before he walked into their building. He asked the masters about grip training, about hip mechanics, about the physics of throwing. Even in victory, Bruce Lee was still a student. That night in his hotel room, he added new entries. The angle of the throws specialist's hip rotation. The ground specialist's method of distributing weight during a pin. The joint lock master's timing on grip transitions. Every detail encoded while it was still precise. Most fighters walk into rooms trying to prove they are the best. Lee walked into rooms trying to learn what he did not yet know. A photograph was taken that afternoon. Black and white, slightly overexposed. Bruce Lee standing in the center of a group of Kodakan masters. The smallest man in the frame. The only one not wearing a GI. The only one without rank displayed. Standing in the exact center. The place of honor. The photograph was never published. Never shown to the press. It stayed within the Kodakan, passed between masters and students as a reminder. That strength is not always size. That power is not always force. That the most dangerous man in any room is not the one with the biggest grip. It is the one who has already figured out how to make that grip work against you. Years later, when people asked the Olympic champion about that day in Tokyo, he never spoke with bitterness. Never made excuses. Never claimed he was unprepared. He said the same thing every time. I grabbed him and he was already gone.